Let's get to next thing on the Giants docket here. Giants done with Daniel Jones. Are you buying this?
I'm buying it, and I like the source that it came from. I'm a big Rich Eisen fan. It was Rich Eisen on his show. He said that the biggest rumor, or one of the biggest rumors that he heard at the combine, was that the Giants are, quote, absolutely done with Daniel Jones. I'm buying it because I've been putting the pieces together. I've been following this news, obviously, to a T. I've heard from this source, that source, this reporter, that reporter. Everybody is saying the same thing. The Giants want to draft a quarterback. Now, the price needs to be right. The player needs to be right. It's going to be easier said than done picking sixth overall with three quarterback needy teams going 1, 2, 3 in the draft. It's going to be difficult to get that quarterback, but the Giants being done with Daniel Jones doesn't shock me. And there's two layers to this conversation. First of all, we can all criticize his performance throughout his career. We could talk about fumbles early on. We could talk about a lack of explosive plays in every single season of his career. You talk about that, but the main conversation that you need to have is about his injuries. This guy just had a torn ACL. Before that, he was dealing with a neck injury, and he had a neck injury 2 seasons prior that ended his season. And so if you look at that and you kind of do a little more research on this neck injury, one more of those and he might not play football anymore. Can you really continue to invest your future in that guy? I mean, the injuries have been such a problem for Daniel Jones throughout his career. It's something that people have not talked about enough. His first few seasons of his career, he missed multiple games with injuries. You're talking ankles, you're talking neck injuries, like I said, you're talking concussions, anything. Like the guy was constantly getting banged up. And no, he wasn't missing extended periods of time, but missing 1 to 2 to 3 games as a quarterback is like an eternity in this league. Like you can't miss time. And that's the problem with Daniel Jones is he's always been consistently banged up. And now those bang ups are piling up. We're seeing him miss significant time with a neck injury, seeing him miss an entire season with a knee injury. So the Giants questioning Daniel Jones and now deciding we're absolutely done with him. I know that a lot of it is involved with his performance because it was so lackluster last year before the season ended, or before his season got ended prematurely. And I know that it's obviously been an up and down career for him throughout his entire career. But really, the conversation is, can you realistically bank on this guy to be your future with this kind of an injury history? Had he had that ACL tear plus the neck injury a year ago in 2022, never gets that contract. But now that you gave him that contract, obviously you want it to work out. You don't want to throw all that money away on a player that you don't plan on using as a starter. But listen, at the end of the day, like I said earlier about the Xavier McKinney situation, the NFL is a business. And one of the things, what's the saying? You hire slowly, fire quickly, right? The Giants need to fire quickly in this regard. Like they made a mistake, cut loose with Daniel Jones, and just admit that you made the mistake and go in a new direction, especially due to the really extensive injury history that this guy possesses.
Yeah, 1,000%. Like, does it stink that you gave this guy the money and it hasn't worked out? Of course. Like that's you want it to work out. You want to pay your quarterback and have him be the guy going forward. But I think it's worse to double and triple down on that rather than just say, hey, we effed up. We got to do something to fix this. Whether it's move up, get aggressive, try to get a quarterback, or whatever it is. He's only played. He has one full season under his belt, right? He's got hurt every other single year. So I don't know how are there, I guess you could probably answer this question better than I can. Is there any Giants fans left who are still thinking that Daniel Jones is the guy and that they should keep him long term?
Yes, there's a lot of Giants fans who feel that way. And I don't agree with those Giants fans. I get in arguments with those Giants fans. There are certain Giants fans who feel like Daniel Jones has always flashed the potential, and the Giants have never given him a team that can maximize his potential. And yes, to some extent, they are right about that because the offensive line has been terrible. The playmakers haven't been there. The coaching staffs have been terrible. But at the end of the day, the argument that I like to come back to is there's a common denominator with all of this, and it's Daniel Jones. The past 5 years, there's been so many problems on this team, and the Giants have taken so many chances and done so many things to try and fix it. They signed a lot of players in free agency on the offensive line a couple of years ago. They've invested more draft capital than any team in the NFL into their offensive line. And going further, how many coaching staffs have they overturned with Daniel Jones, all to maximize Daniel Jones, which hasn't happened yet? How many times have they invested in playmakers that haven't panned out? Kenny Galladay was a big investment, and for some reason, Kenny Galladay was just like the worst football player ever after he joined the New York Giants. I don't buy it. I think a lot of it is just Daniel Jones. I really think that he is one of those players where if it's not perfect around him, he can't succeed. And unfortunately, when things just go a little bit off script, And I think the offensive line is a big part of this. If you take a look at Daniel Jones's stats, his pressure to sack ratio and the amount of pressures that he brings upon himself, according to the PFF advanced stats, it's a significantly higher rate than most quarterbacks in the NFL. Like his pressures, whenever he's pressured, it's almost always, it's like 30% of the time, which is like double the league average. It's a sack. And then again, he's getting himself pressured like 30% of the time, which is double the league average. So this is a guy who welcomes pressure, plays poorly under pressure, takes more sacks than he should, doesn't get the ball out of his hands, and doesn't see players downfield. And I think that's more so than anything been the problem with the New York Giants over the past 5 years. It's not the fact that Kenny Golladay wasn't good. It's not the fact that they haven't put investments into the offensive line. They've done everything that they could for this guy. Like they've literally given him everything that you could ever ask for as a starting quarterback in the NFL. And it hasn't worked one way or another. But I think the common denominator here is the fact that it didn't work for Daniel Jones. Let's try with a new quarterback, see if it works for him. Maybe the situation isn't perfect. Maybe he's so good that it doesn't matter anyway. That's what the New York Giants need to look for, is a quarterback that rises above all the pitfalls of his team, takes his team further, and can win games on his own.
Yeah, I mean, I think your perspective makes the most sense, and it sounds very reminiscent of the Zach Wilson debate. And granted, Daniel Jones has shown significantly more than anything that Zach Wilson's shown at this level, but you still have fans like, oh, the Jets f this up. You know, it's on the Jets because of the line, the coaches, this, that, and the other thing. And really, what it comes down to at the end of the day, if you are going to be the guy, eventually you got to overcome some adversity, right? Like you can't have this picture perfect scenario every single time. You got to be able to win games. Like, I don't know, CJ Stroud's a really good example. Like, was the Houston Texans roster perfect this year? No, they weren't expected to be any good, but the guy came into the league, was a stud right away, and they get into the playoffs because of it. Like, I don't know, eventually you got to rise up and, be able to lead your team. And I just don't think either side of this, on the Zach Wilson side or with Daniel Jones, like they're going into year 6 with Daniel Jones. How much more time can you possibly give the guy?
I'm in the same boat. And I know that not every quarterback steps in and looks like CJ Stroud. Few do. It's very rare that happens. And oftentimes they're a project. It takes them a while to develop. I mean, look at Josh Allen. It took him like 3 years before he became good. And now he's amazing, though. You gave him enough time. The Giants have given Daniel Jones enough time. He's not going to reach that amazing level. And so I think that it's very obvious now that it's time to reset that rookie quarterback contract and that rookie window and just move in a new direction with somebody who you hope steps in and does the CJ Stroud thing. But if he doesn't, he steps in and does a Josh Allen thing, or maybe develops slowly over time, doesn't reach the Josh Allen heights, whatever. Just try and reach for something higher than what you have right now and settling for the mediocrity that is Daniel Jones.
So Giants took Daniel Jones 6th overall. They have the 6th overall pick this year. Are we going to see a repeat of history? Is it going to be a quarterback at 6? Are you predicting a move up for a quarterback? I'm putting you on the spot. What's the feel like a month out from the draft?
Yeah, part of the report of them being done with Daniel Jones is that they've been actively trying to trade up. Like at the combine, apparently they were talking to everybody, and it was the worst kept secret at the combine was one of the quotes that I saw on a report. So I think they're going to try to trade up, but again, takes 2 to tango. Easier said than done. They're picking at 6. All those 3 teams need quarterbacks. I think the most likely situation is that they trade into 3 with the Patriots and they land their guy. However, if they don't, I go back and forth. I don't know if they're going to force it with a quarterback at 6. Jim McCarthy fall into them. That would feel very reminiscent of when Daniel Jones was drafted at 6. It was like they just took a quarterback because they wanted to take a quarterback, and they forced it. But maybe they feel convicted about JJ McCarthy. One thing that I'll say, whatever quarterback they take, I'm going to have confidence in just because it's Brian Daboll coaching him. Even looking at the work that he did last year with Tyrod Taylor and Tommy DeVito, getting those guys to win games and look like good quarterbacks for a stretch of time, I feel confident that Brian Daboll could do that with just about anybody, and then a young quarterback with tools really develop them. So my prediction is that the Giants are going to take a quarterback in the first round, but again, it's going to be really tough, easier said than done. And I know that they really like Malik Neighbors and a few of those other playmakers. So we'll see. It's going to be interesting to see what happens in free agency with teams like the Patriots, where those quarterbacks go in free agency. And then I think we'll get a more clear picture.
Absolutely. But who knows? By this time next week, we might have a better idea where some of those veterans are, and the path for both these Jets and Giants in the draft could become a little bit more obvious at that point.